Hey guys, how you doing? The Motorola Moto G17 is one of those classic budget smartphones where you immediately start wondering if the performance is actually enough for everyday use and where exactly the compromises were made. So I took a closer look at the device in the evening blue color and tested it mainly in daily use, including camera performance, battery life, and overall performance. And I can already tell you there are definitely some highlights, but also some clear downsides. Starting with the design, the Moto G17 actually makes a surprisingly good impression. The back feels premium, it sits nicely in the hand, and most importantly, you don't really see fingerprints neither on the back nor on the included case, which makes a big difference in everyday use because the phone always looks clean without constantly wiping it. The case itself also matches the color of the back perfectly, which I personally really like because instead of getting a cheap transparent case, you actually get something that blends nicely into the design. At just 8.70mm, the phone is pleasantly slim, feels comfortable, and overall well built. You also get an IP64 water resistant design, which protects against splashes. Gorilla Glass 3 on the front adds some basic durability for everyday use, and on top of that, you will still get a 3.5mm headphone jack on the top, and you also get a USB-C port on the bottom. The 6.72-inch Full HD Plus LCD display has a resolution of 24 by 1080p, and with 391 ppi, it delivers a solid level of sharpness. Overall content looks clean, text is easy to read, and watching videos on this panel is enjoyable. Brightness goes up to around 1050 nits, which is especially noticeable outdoors, and there's also an extra brightness mode in the settings that pushes the display even further, although this will have an impact on the battery life. Colors can be adjusted with different profiles, contrast settings, and a night mode that is easier on the eyes in the evening. However, one clear downside is the refresh rate, because the display is limited to 60Hz, and you can definitely feel that in everyday use. Especially when scrolling or navigating through menus, everything feels less smooth compared to devices with 90 or 120Hz. When it comes to the audio, Motorola includes stereo speakers with Dolby Atmos, which deliver clear sound with decent volume. Bass is of course limited, but overall for videos, music, or YouTube, the sound is absolutely fine for this price range. Inside the Moto G17, you get the MediaTek Helio G81 Extreme processor, combined with 8GB of RAM, which can be virtually expanded up to 16GB using RAM Boost. On paper, that sounds quite solid, but in real-world usage, you quickly notice the limitations for everyday tasks. The system runs generally stable, but there are occasional slowdowns, especially when opening apps or swiping up to access the recent app menu. You can notice slight stutters. It is not completely laggy, but it is also not consistently smooth. Gaming makes this even more obvious. Demanding titles like Genshin Impact are only playable on the lowest settings, and even then you will notice frame drops. From time to time, the device clearly reaches its limits here. There is also no dedicated game mode like a game turbo, which means you don't get additional performance optimizations for casual games. However, the performance is perfectly fine for games like Clash Royale or Subway Surfers. So you just need to keep in mind that this is not a gaming smartphone, but rather a device designed for everyday use and lighter games. The Moto G17 runs on Android 15, which is definitely a plus point. The interface is close to stock Android, but there are some pre-installed apps. Many of them can be removed fairly quickly, but you don't get a complete clean system. Motorola also includes its own apps like Moto Secure for security features and Hello You, which is a kind of news and information platform. Within the settings, you get customization options for the display, including color profiles, contrast, and the extra brightness mode, but there is no options to adjust the refresh rate. Motorola also includes several gesture features like the 3-finger screenshot. There's a one-handed mode, a sidebar for quick app access, and the ability to open up the camera by double pressing a power button. Now, one of the most useful features is the chop gesture, which lets you quickly turn on the flashlight like this. The side-mounted fingerprint sensor works reliably and unlocks the device quickly. There's also face unlock, which works well as long as the light conditions are good. One big advantage is the expandable storage, because besides the 128 gigs of internal storage, you can add up to 1 TB via microSD, which is a great feature in its price range. The camera is one of the more interesting aspects of the Moto G17. Now on the back you get a 50MP main sensor and a 5MP ultra wide angle camera, while on the front there is a 32MP camera. The main camera delivers solid results in good lighting conditions, details are decent, textures are well preserved, and overall sharpness is at a good level. Especially the color reproduction stands out because it looks natural without being overly saturated. Dynamic range is also quite good for this price range. Bright areas don't blow out too quickly and shadows still retain some detail, which results in balanced images. Especially for landscapes or high contrast scenes, when shooting closer subjects, the camera is able to capture fine details reasonably well, even though it cannot compete with more expensive devices. Autofocus works reliably and fast enough for everyday use. The ultra-wide camera is more of an extra feature because the quality drops noticeably with fewer details and visible noise, especially in low light. It is fine for occasional shots, but nothing more. In night mode, you see the typical budget behavior. Images get brighter, but also softer. Details are lost and light sources can appear overexposed. It is usable for quick shots, but clearly limited. The front camera, on the other hand, delivers surprisingly good results. Selfies are sharp, skin tones look natural, and the portrait mode separates the subject quite well from the background. On the software side, you get multiple modes like night mode, portrait, panorama, pro mode, and the Google Lens integration. One of the biggest highlights is the battery. With 5200 mAh, Motorola claims up to 55.8 hours of usage, and that is actually quite realistic in everyday use. With normal usage, you can easily get 2 days of battery life, sometimes even more, and even with heavier usage, the phone comfortably lasts a full day. Charging is done with 18 watts turbo power, which is not particularly fast, but perfectly acceptable for this price range. Now, overall, Motorola Moto G17 is a typical budget smartphone with clear strengths and weaknesses. On the positive side, you get a nice design, excellent battery life, a solid main camera, and useful features like expandable storage and a headphone jack. On the downside, you have the performance with occasional slowdowns, the 60Hz display, and limited gaming capabilities. Now, if you're looking for a reliably everyday smartphone that lasts long and takes decent photos, this is a good choice. But if smooth performance or gaming is important to you, then you should probably look for alternatives.